Hey, it's MJ from the Coaches Panel. I hope you're well, and welcome back to another one of our player reviews, where every single person that changed clubs via the free agency or the trade mechanism this AFL offseason, I'm giving you my thoughts on what it means for the club they've departed, the club they've arrived at, and wrap it up for us about what it means for AFL Fantasy, SuperCoach, and Dream Team players for 2024 and beyond. Tyler Brockman is who we are talking about. He has departed the Hawks. He is now headed back home to Western Australia. He's a part of the West Coast Eagles. What does it mean for the Hawks, his departed club? Well, it adds a little bit of a weakened forward line. I'm really intrigued to see what Hawthorn do, not just through this off-season, but how they're going to rebuild this forward line to be back to its prolific and powerful best. Mitch Lewis is the centerpiece of this forward rebuild. He is a strong, hulking, contested marker. I really like what he offers. If you can get over some of those little injury niggles, he's going to be a really nice guy you can build your forward line around. Dylan Moore. Get your Moores right, MJ. Dylan Moore, I think, is a beautiful hybrid half forward that can kind of float between an extra midfielder and a pressure small forward. He's not really either of those. He's a hybrid of those, but I think he's a really crafty and smart player. I think he's a nice addition. But then there's a couple of interesting spots. Marbial Chol has nominated the club. At time of releasing this video, he hasn't made it there, but he will make it there. And Luke Bruce has been an absolute star of the league for well over a decade, but he's certainly on his last legs. So what this Hawthorn forward line looks like, I'm really quite intrigued about, because Moore's a handy player, but he's not a scary proposition that's going to week in, week out, feel like he's going to win you the game. We know Bruce can pop up and be damaging, and Mitch Lewis can clunk a mark, but outside of those two, I feel like it's just not a potent forward dynamic just yet. And that's okay, because they're not at that stage of their rebuild. But over the next 2 to 3 years, they've really got to start adding some significant pieces of the puzzle, because I'm seeing a forward line that as yet doesn't bring fear and intimidation and worry to opposition coaches too drastically. I think in other parts of the ground, they're building quite nicely. So to me, it makes sense why they're looking at a Zane Dersma, for example, who's rumoured to be one of their targets in the upcoming AFL draft. The absence of Brockman, and the reason I do all that is Brockman, while not an amazing footballer at this point in time in his AFL career, is quite a smart and crafty small. He is the guy that makes opposition small defenders get nervous when he gets a moment of separation on them. He does have some speed. He does have some class about him. Yep, he gets a little bit lapse in concentration at times, as any young footballer does, but I really think Hawthorn are going to miss the goal smarts and the speed of Tyler Brockman. I'm not seeing them just yet replace that. Yes, Jack Gunston, if he lands there, might help them a little bit, but again, he and Bruce just bide time. So maybe there's some things bubbling under in the VFL level that as yet we haven't seen drastically at the senior level, but to me, I'm looking at this Hawthorn forward line and I'm getting a little bit concerned that maybe there's not the firepower they need just yet to really rebuild back as quick as I think some of their fans would hope. From a West Coast Eagles perspective, I really like this pickup for the Eagles. Brockman, like I said, really speedy, really smart footballer, really does have some X factor, and if he can get the gap between his best and his worst football a little bit more narrow, then I think West Coast have a really nice one here. Oscar Allen is a beautiful footballer. He's an incredible, hulking, big, clunking mark. Beautiful shot at goal. I think West Coast can build not just their forward line, but their entire AFL list around him. Hope he becomes the next captain of this football club. Then they've got a couple of other nice aging pieces of the puzzle that can play some supporting roles, but much like Hawthorn, they need multiple dynamic entries inside forward 50 and options at goal. With Brockman arriving, I think this is adding a really nice crafty small piece. I'd love to see him really step up his game into that small kind of crumbing forward parts of his game. I think he's got bits of it, but I'd love to see that elevate up. But I think from a West Coast Eagles perspective, I see why they prioritise Tyler Brockman. He is a smart footballer. I think he'll do a beautiful job for them at the club, especially if his consistency can really raise up a couple more levels. What does it mean for us in AFL Fantasy, Supercoach and Dream Team? Well, he's got some games where he's shown moments. He didn't play at all in 2022, but he showed some scoring moments. People in some formats this year even picked him up as a little bit of a cash cow at various points of the year, and he made a little bit of money for us. But coming off the back of an average across all your formats in the low to mid 50s, for Classic, he's not someone you're going to be really seriously looking at. I can't see him, while he will have forward status, elevate 30, 35, 40 points per game. I just don't think that's in his scoring lexicon. Don't think he can do it. And I believe we'll get considerable options that are cheaper that can match, if not really leapfrog Tyler. So I think Brockman's a really nice footballer, but I don't think he's a SuperCoach AFL Fantasy or Dream Team relevant in Classic. And in drafts, well, the big caveat with your drafts is always these two kind of things. How many coaches, meaning how many teams, and then what's your on-squad and depth of squad in bench needs. Based on those two caveats, Brockman is someone you should never consider, or he will present some late draft value. For me, he's probably the kind of guy, unless it's a dynasty sort of keeper league, he's probably not someone you should be looking at, but maybe for some category leagues, again, depending on the depth that's there. But for the most part, I think he's going to be a really nice player. I think a 70 average is probably his ceiling, but I wouldn't be surprised if he has some games early on, depending on fixtures, depending on opponents. He might be able to pop a few 80s, 90s, and you make some draft movements around off the back of it, but probably not the most relevant guy moving clubs this year from us as a fantasy community, but certainly for West Coast, I think he'll be a really nice addition. Do you agree with my take on Brockman, or you disagree? You can comment below here on YouTube and let me know what you think. If you're enjoying this video and this series as I review every player that's moving clubs this off-season through trade and free agency, make sure you subscribe to the channel, turn the notifications on, so as soon as the episode is live, you will be notified. I'll be back again soon with another player review of someone that's moved clubs this off-season.